we have a lot of huge problems. We have the nuclear problem in Korea. We have the nuclear problem in Iran. We have, of course, the whole array of problems, each of which, Afghanistan, and so forth. But then we have the financial issues. But they really are issues of the construction of a new world order. That's what this is about.
I'm no Bible thumper, and I have a big problem with organized religion, especially the Vatican. But our rights have been given to us by God, whether you believe in God or not, endowed by our Creator with these certain inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. There are forces that wish to eliminate God and thereby eliminating our God-given rights.
But this is the greatest golf tournament in the world.
The Open Championship of the United States of America.
A teacher is in trouble for bringing a religion into his classroom, but should he lose his job?
When we go into a public school, we have to leave God at the door. It just came to the point where I couldn't do that anymore.
We've got to do something different. The schools are failing.
And I would go to 6 or 7 days a week, not just Monday through Friday.
You're not going to be painting, okay? You're going to be writing down whatever comes to your mind when you hear the word gay or when you hear the word lesbian.
So nothing's right or wrong
There's
in
no
this
right
either?
That's right.
They are stealing our children. But because they are leaving the body of the child with us, we don't even know what's happening.
It has been argued that parents are not involved enough in their children's lives, leaving much to the school teachers to teach the children. And this is, again, not to just the detriment of the family, but the detriment of the education of our children. Paulo Leone wrote in the Leipzig Connection, Sabotage of the U.S. Education System, any review of a typical elementary school textbook printed before 1910 shows dramatically that students were learning mathematical skills that few of our current students know anything about. A 1990 survey of college seniors showed 42% couldn't name the dates of the war between the states to within half a century. That's from The Dumbing Down of Our Kids by Charles Sykes. So why has the quality of American education declined so dramatically over the last 80 years? Educators, many of whom were schooled themselves in these Soviet-style programs in colleges across the nation, funded by the great foundations, the Rockefeller Foundation, among them, the Carnegie and Guggenheim Foundations, all claim they need more money. Well, it's been proven that the more money that we give to these great organizations and to these institutions and for curriculum, the dumber our children become.
If I had my way, government education would be brought to a halt.
Turning your children over to total strangers and having those strangers work on your child's mind, it's a mad idea.
We have never invested as much in public education as we should have because we've always had kind of a private notion of children. Your kid is yours and totally your responsibility. We haven't had a very collective notion of these are our children. So part of it is we have to break through our kind of private idea that kids belong to their parents or kids belong to their families and recognize that kids belong to whole communities. Once it's everybody's responsibility and not just the households, then we start making better investments.
This little book here is part of, several volumes. A study that was commissioned by the Carnegie Corporation of New York to the American Historical Association to basically change American education from factual learning and history and science and everything to the kind of education we have today that was implemented after World War II. But this little book is 1934. Compiled by the American Historical Association. This book was the result of a project funded to the tune of $340,000 by the Carnegie Corporation of New York called Investigation of the Social Studies in the Schools, and was carried out by the American Historical Association. Professor Harold Lasky, a philosopher of British socialism, said of this report, quote, "At bottom and stripped of its carefully neutral phrases, the report is an educational program for a socialist America." Important excerpts from the conclusions follow. The Commission is under special obligation to its sponsor, the American Historical Association. Above all, it recognizes its indebtedness to the trustees of the Carnegie Corporation, whose financial aid made possible the whole 5-year investigation of social science instruction in the schools, eventuating in the following conclusions and recommendations. The Commission could not limit itself to a survey of textbooks, curricula, methods of instruction, and schemes of examination, but was impelled to consider the condition and prospects of the American people as a part of Western civilization merging into a world order. Of utmost importance is the following admission of the planners' goals to change our free enterprise representative republic. And let me point out here, I'll read this. You know, one could say, oh, that was written in 1934. And so what's she talking about? But Carnegie Corporation, knowingly or unknowingly, I guess they didn't care, they have consistently, through the years, been involved in projects, agreements, the one with the Soviet Union, the School to Work enterprise, what's going on right now, no more academics, our children are being trained for the global workforce, all that. They were involved in originally the National Assessment for Educational Progress, which now is testing values, NAEP, tests children's, 60% of it is attitudes and values that they're testing for on the environment, on whatever, right? They were deeply involved and funded the Education Commission of the States, which used to send out, all their directives from Denver, Colorado to every state legislature. And this, usually on the Senate Education Committee, there would be one member on each state Senate Education Committee, the legislature, who was a member of the Education Commission of the States. They were deeply involved in, as I said, the United States. Reagan signed the United States-Soviet education agreements. A month after the Carnegie Corporation, David Hamburg signed the Carnegie Soviet Academy of Science agreement, which was really bad, really bad. And charter schools are all part of it. That's school choice. They say, and a lot of people don't know that charter schools were set up primarily for taking over the public education system through charter schools in order to implement the Cuban or Russian or German school-to-work system, training children for jobs in the workforce. They will never have an opportunity to change very rarely can you get out of it. The child is not working for his own upward mobility, what he wants. He's working for the corporate fascist state.
By the second month in school, Maya came home looking very down. She no longer was as happy as she used to be. Her mom didn't know that Maya was learning a subject called death education. All that talk about death gave Maya nightmares and made her nervous all the time. When her mom found out about death ed, it confused her. She didn't understand why young children were being taught about death. But she didn't say anything because, after all, the teacher was the professional, and surely she knows what she is doing. On the 6th week of school, Maya's mom found a test in Maya's backpack. The test was marked, "Not to be taken home." Her mom looked over the test and found questions about her personal thoughts. Do you sometimes get nervous talking in front of class? Do you ever get depressed? Do you feel like your parents are abusing you? Upon further research, Maya's mom found out that this was a psychological test given to the students without the parents' consent. The kids were offered pizza or movie tickets if they filled out all the answers. Investigating further, she found out that if the child was evaluated as high risk for depression, she would be sent to the school counselor, who would then tell the parents that the child needed medication. She also found out that most of the kids taking the test had mental problems and that they would all be asked to see the psychologist. Maya's mother was alarmed, but she let Maya see the counselor. She was worried about her little girl and felt she might need help. And after all, the counselor is a professional, and if he says Maya needs medicine, he must know what he's doing. In 1879, Wilhelm Wundt, the father of psychology, decided that man had no soul. Man was just a stimulus response animal with no self-determinism. He needed to be trained like any other animal. Supply the correct stimulus, you get the correct response, just like rats or dogs. In the early 1900s, Teachers College taught teachers the new science of psychology. These new methods of teaching would devalue academics and concentrate on behavioral techniques to mold children's values. Schools would be turned into mini psych clinics. The Rockefeller Foundation backed Teachers College and new educators like Edward Lee Thorndike, James Earl Russell, and John Dewey, who were disciples of Wundt. Together they rewrote textbooks and curriculum for the new American education system.
Supported by the Rockefeller Foundation and the National Institute of Education and the U.S. Department of Education, Schooling for a Global Age is published. In the preface, John Goodlad wrote, "Enlightening social engineering is required to face situations that demand global action now. Education is a long-term solution. Parents and the general public must be reached also. Otherwise, children and youth enrolled in globally oriented programs may find themselves in conflict with values assumed in the home."
1965, passage of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. The number of educational psychologists in schools rise from 455 in 1969 to 16,146 in 1992. Probably just coincidentally, the number of child murderers and suicides skyrocketed as well. Certain members of the government were overjoyed with this new form of education. Controlling the behavior of people, keeping them dumb, they could pass any laws they wanted and no one would even know. Now the program was complete. Dumb them down, fill them with drugs, then indoctrinate them with facts they no longer had the power to refute. While the mental health experts were taking control of the kids away from their parents, the kids' bodies were also being poisoned, making education even harder. Fluoride, found in drinking water and hundreds of products, is actually a highly toxic industrial waste product.
2 years ago, 16-year-old Corey Badsgard took a rifle to his high school and held 23 classmates hostage. That morning, Corey was on a mix of antidepressants prescribed for situational depression. His father says the pills turned Corey from a sensitive teenage boy to a volatile marauder, susceptible to blind rage. We found a disturbing number of recent school shooters were either on medication or were experiencing withdrawal. 15-year-old Kip Kinkle withdrawing from Prozac when he shot 22 classmates, killing 2 after murdering his mother and stepfather at his home in Springfield, Oregon. 15-year-old TJ Solomon also on a mix of antidepressants when he aimed his shotgun at classmates in Conyers, Georgia, wounding 6. And 17-year-old Eric Harris on Luvox when he and partner Dylan Klebold killed 12 classmates and a teacher. Columbine.
One of the things that in the past we have known about depression is that it very, very rarely leads to violence. It's only been since the advent of these new SSRI drugs that we have murderers, sometimes even mass murderers, taking antidepressant drugs.
Schools will become clinics whose purpose is to provide individualized psychosocial treatment for the student, and teachers must become psychosocial therapists. This will include biochemical and psychological mediation of learning, as drugs are introduced experimentally to improve in the learner such qualities as personality, concentration, and memory. Children are to become the objects of experimentation. The National Education Association Report on Education, 1970.